Welcome along, Journalism Media Week. It's the final day of 2021 sessions. And this afternoon, on the way very shortly at 3 o'clock, we've got Mobeen Azhar, alumni from Leeds Trinity University. He's on the way very shortly. But first, from The Athletic, it's the sports correspondent, football correspondent, that is David Ornstein. David, thank you so much for joining us at Journalism Media Week 2021. Really appreciate your time.
Pleasure, Darren. Thanks for having me. It's a prestigious event as always, and a great lineup you've got as ever. So delighted to be a part of it.
Well, it's great to have you along, definitely. And I know, it's a mega busy job that you've got with The Athletic. When you joined, did you believe it was going to be as busy or as successful than it's turned out to be?
I hoped so, certainly, because I'd been at the BBC for 12 years and The Athletic laid out a really exciting proposal to me. I didn't actually know much about The Athletic full stop before they approached me, but once we got talking and I did a lot of research, I realized there was enormous potential there. And I spoke long and hard with them about creating a bit of a niche for myself, working off a blank canvas, which is what they wanted to do. Basically design my own job, which is a dream scenario to be in. And it allowed me to join a team and a really ambitious project that would allow me to take my journalism to the next level, and hopefully in doing so, help The Athletic make its mark within the UK. And bit by bit, started from a written perspective personally, and then we brought a podcast to fruition and a YouTube video as well. So I've got the sort of multi-platform presence that I wanted. I've played a small part in helping The Athletic's UK operation be extremely successful so far. Of course, there's some apprehension when you join a startup, a new project. That's only been in the USA for a few years and is taking on an established industry and trying to carve a space for itself. And many newcomers have diminished pretty quickly over the years, but this one had a very clear vision. They follow their words with actions. There will always be bumps along the way, but actually it's going very well now from a personal and organizational company perspective.
Yeah, I'm going to talk more about The Athletic with you shortly, but I want to come back to the sort of like the start of your career and when you were in the same position as our students here at Leeds Trinity University, doing a journalism course yourself down in possibly one of the greatest towns in the world, Bournemouth. What made you decide on journalism at Bournemouth?
Yeah, well, I don't want to bore you all, so I'll make it as an abridged version as possible. So I was very keen to become a sports player, if we take things even further back, like many people who end up in sport-related jobs or journalism specifically. When that wasn't going to be possible, I had done some work experience at school at Capital Radio in London, and I loved it. I had a real feel for radio, and so that was my target to, if I couldn't play sport, to work in it, and that honed in on radio. I wanted to become a radio broadcaster, commentate on it, talk about it. As school went on and university drew into sight, I still had the passion to be a sports reporter of some description. But I thought, you have to go to do a traditional academic degree like many in my family and people we knew at that time. And in the mainstream media courses were being absolutely panned in the press. It was being talked about as an easy way to get a degree, a huge amount of criticism. And I felt really worried about going and doing a media course, even though I'd really enjoyed media studies at A-level and had got a taste of the professional side as well. And so I was looking into English courses and English and media. And I didn't really like any of them. None of them got the juices flowing. On the sort of UCAS weeks, I went down to all different universities, Sussex and Loughborough. All of them had their pros and cons, but then this course at Bournemouth appeared in the UCAS guide, and it looked perfect. Sort of combination of practical journalism to industry standard facilities and theory as well that would prepare you directly for a job in journalism. And I talked with my family about how not to be afraid of doing a vocational course that might not be your traditional English or science or one of these really academic focused degrees, but to do a horses for courses approach and maximize my skill set and bring my sort of ambitions to fruition. And so I went down to see the course in Bournemouth, and it was fantastic. Television studios, radio studios, print facilities, online journalism was only just starting up there, but student magazine, student newspaper, student radio, student TV, links to the industry, lecturers on the course who were working as professional journalists, and it just felt absolutely right. And it's a brilliant town, and there's a good party scene. You've got to enjoy the good times when you're at uni as well. So it was the perfect combination. About an hour and a half from where I grew up, and yeah, the fun times rolled from then on.
Yeah, and you're quite right. What a place to do 3 years. Not a bad choice at all, really, I think. I'm interested as well that, like, after you've left university, you say that radio was quite key for you earlier on, but it would then sort of like written journalism became more of a thing straight out of uni.
Yeah, so very quickly go through the Bournemouth time. Student radio, though, it was pretty oversubscribed. I think it was Nerve Radio down in Bournemouth, and what wasn't in a good state was the student newspaper. So I was able to more easily get my name into print than my voice onto radio at that point in time. And then the newspaper was kind of failing. So in my second year, I just offered to edit it. And I didn't even know what editing meant, but somebody to run the newspaper, to write articles, to design pages, which was one of our modules. So I knew a little bit about it, and I had the software on my laptop. And so I kind of accidentally got more into the written side of journalism. And of course, the written side is crucial for all of your broadcasting as well, as I would later find out at the BBC, that you're writing scripts for television and radio, voice pieces. The written skill is absolutely pivotal. And then I went through the 3 years there, and I did about 20 spells of work experience externally for radio stations, newspapers, magazines, in different parts of the country, all unpaid, no travel expenses. And I just wanted to turn over every single stone to be able to, at some point, get a job in journalism. I knew that with 75 students graduating per year from that course, and that's just one course in one country in an industry that mid-thousands and hundreds of thousands of people want to get into, that I needed to set myself apart. And that's why I did so much work experience. And when I came out of university, I wanted to go traveling. And I said to myself, the only reason I won't go traveling is if one of the applications I put in for a sort of national level job gets me an interview and goes further. I didn't think anything of it because I had applied for work experience at all the national newspapers, every single break I had from uni, and I didn't even get a reply. I ended up just doing local radio, local newspapers and magazines and things. And so I came out of Bournemouth, but then one of the applications did get a reply in the end for a traineeship at The Guardian as a trainee sports journalist. And I couldn't believe it. I was absolutely stunned. Went along to the interview with my portfolio of work from Bournemouth, kept all my clippings, all my radio edits and stuff like that. And I still was thinking, this is sort of sacrilege to say, but I've never been in love with writing. I've become a news journalist who really is thrilled by the idea of getting my news, my information into the written word, into print or online journalism or social media. But I don't love writing. I'm not a good writer in terms of long, colorful features. I leave that to the experts and focus on what I'm good at. So I was still focused on hopefully doing some radio or TV, but by now I had built up the written skills through especially through the student paper. and I managed to get an interview at The Guardian, gave it my best shot, didn't think anything of it. And then they called me back for a second interview, again, threw absolutely everything at it. I just presumed that these jobs ultimately go to students from Oxford and Cambridge. But I managed to go all the way. There was a couple of hundred applicants. I never achieved good grades at school. I don't know how on earth I got that job. I can only put it down to practical experience and the belief that hard work will always trump natural gifts. If you've got both, then fair play to you. You're very lucky. I only had one, and that was determination and hard work, the ability to network and build contacts, speak to people, be fearless, or at least show an impression of fearlessness, even when you're petrified, and go to events, sacrifice yourself when everyone else is going on nights out, and just go above and beyond. And it got me to The Guardian, and there I was in written journalism professionally in 2006. Did a year there, carried on freelancing a little bit afterwards for The Guardian, for the Sunday Telegraph, for the Evening Standard, and then a job on the BBC Sport website came up, and I was never going to turn that down. So I was staying in the written word, but crucially, there was a drive at the BBC in the subsequent years to get people working across all platforms, which took me all the way back to the course I selected at Bournemouth, which was BA Honours in multimedia journalism. I always wanted to be a sports journalist working across all the different platforms. And gradually that door was opening at the BBC.
I think you've hit the nail absolutely on the head there, where you're talking about it's working hard, it's creating contacts, and I think sometimes in networking as well when you're starting out. And I think, you know, as a journalist in your position that you are now, with an array of network of contacts that you're able to rely on for sources, for information, I think when you're starting out as a sports journalist, that can maybe seem a little bit daunting of, well, how do I get to that point of creating those contacts? And I think certainly when you're going through your journalism course, it may seem like almost an impossibility, but is it always just about speaking to as many people as possible?
Some of it's luck and some of it is design. The luck is when you work at places that you have colleagues or databases of phone numbers, and whether that's on work experience or in your paid employment, there will always be people, good people, fellow journalists, editors, producers who have connections, and you inherit them. You get crazy luck as well. So I remember there was a Premier League club who I was sent to the press conference of when I was on my Guardian traineeship. And it was just me and one other or a handful of other journalists who were called into the manager's office. There weren't enough journalists present, and there were no cameras to do it in front of. Actually, it was in the Championship, not in the Premier League at the time. Not enough of us to do a full-blown press conference. So we just got called into the manager's office, but he was running late. I was the first one there, and I looked to the left on a notice board, and there was the whole first team squad's names and all of their phone numbers. So I think my phone I had at the time could take pictures, and I took a picture of it, and I had the whole squad's phone numbers, which doesn't happen often, I must say. So that's luck. The design is all of your own making. So going to as many events as possible, always asking people for their phone number or email address. What's the worst that can happen? They say no. Get yourself some business cards made up. Do it off the internet. If you don't work somewhere where they provide them for you, like I do now, I made my own business cards for years. Be creative with your. I mean, I'm not suggesting you lie about where you work, that you're a student or whatever, but feel free to be emboldened to say I'm a up and coming journalist. You know, you don't, if you feel uncomfortable saying I'm a student when you've gone to a professional conference, then you don't have to. Maybe say you're a freelance journalist, which in essence is true, because anybody who's not employed can be a freelance journalist. And talk yourself up. You know, say you've got ambitions to get to the top, and speak to these people. I know it can be nerve-wracking, and I get nervous myself, and sometimes I don't do it. There's somebody across the room, and I see, and he's talking to someone else, and I think, oh, I'm going to go over and embarrass myself. I don't want to disturb them. They might want to talk to me. And every time I decide not to go and talk to them, I spend the whole journey home and that night and days after regretting it, deeply regretting it. So what's the worst that can happen? They'll say, I'd rather not give you my phone number, or speak to the press officer, or speak to my PA or something like that, which is a step forward in itself more often than not. You have to be bold. You have to be brave. And if you're not, and if you're shy, you have to find that inner strength from somewhere to go and do it. Because if you don't, somebody else will. I've got absolute stacks of phone numbers, business cards, in a contacts book on my phone from those days when I used to just go to conferences of any description: sports medicine conference, agents conference, sports law conferences. I knew nothing about the world of law or medicine or agents, but everything I saw on the internet or heard about, I just got my name put down on the list. I said, I'll write an article. More often than not, when you get there, the company or the organizers of the conference don't actually ask you if you're writing an article, because you might not have a publication to do it for. But just blag your way there. Get yourself to these events, to press conferences. Other journalists, you never know where your paths might cross in the future. So get, wherever you're doing work experience, keep all of their phone numbers. One of my biggest break, I think, obviously came with the Guardian job after Bournemouth Uni. And the reason I heard about the Guardian job at about 9:30 p.m. on a Thursday night, while I was looking for flights around the world and travel tickets to go to Thailand and Vietnam and Australia and all these places, I got a text message from a guy who I met on the final day of work experience at the Southern Daily Echo in Southampton. When I went over to him, I had been too shy to speak to him the whole time I was on work experience there. I was on work experience there from the 19th to the 23rd of December 2005, when everyone else had gone back from uni for Christmas. They were boozing and out having parties and everything, which I still had time to do on the 24th and 26th. But I went to the work experience. I was shy. The sports reporters there weren't particularly warm. There was only a couple of them in so close to Christmas, but one of them was going to a Harry Redknapp press conference at Southampton, and I just said, could I come with you? He said yes. We were in the car together. We barely spoke on the way there. I sat at the back of the room. He sat at the front. He said, right, you ready to go now? Go home. I think it was a Friday. And just as he was dropping me back at the offices to get in my car, I said, could I keep your phone number? He said, yeah, gave me his phone number. We kept in contact. Every time there was a transfer involving Southampton the following January, I would always text him, what's going on here? And he'd reply. We'd have a bit of friendly conversation. And then in the summer of 2005, I've forgotten the year. No, that was 2005. So summer of 2006, he texted me out of the blue and said, have you seen this job going at The Guardian? It looks perfect for you. I hadn't, because I was looking at my around the world ticket flights, went on The Guardian's website by about 10 p.m. now, and trainee sports journalist at The Guardian. Every single thing about it was perfect for me. I didn't think I'd get it, but it was perfect. Stayed up through the night, filling out an application, CV, cover letter, answering all the questions. Thought I did a terrible job. Sorry, the reason I stayed up through the night is when I looked at the application, I thought I was going to have a couple of weeks, and it said it closed at 9 a.m. the following morning on the Friday. So I stayed up through the night, filling it in, submitted it, and eventually somehow got the job. And it was all because I kept in touch with that sports reporter on the Southern Daily Echo. And to this day, I'm eternally grateful for him, because it set me on my path. So that shows, keep in touch with fellow journalists, keep in touch with people from events, always send them messages or calls, good result of the weekend, or good luck for tomorrow's fixture. If you ever want to meet for a coffee or speak on the phone or have a Zoom, just keep going and going and going. Don't annoy them if they sort of push back, but keep knocking at the door very politely. Make sure you are very respectful. Don't be rude in your messages, etc. And also triangulate your sources. So think of who might know other people. So you might know a physiotherapist at, I don't know, Dagenham and Redbridge, and you think he's in non-league. Firstly, never lose that contact. Never burn a bridge, because you never know where that contact may end up in the future. Go and see him when he's at Dagenham and Redbridge, because the next thing you know, he gets a job at Manchester United, and you were the only person who talked to him at Dagenham and Redbridge. But when I say triangulate, think of where they've been in their background. So if there's a big story at West Ham and you've got a contact at Leicester who used to work at West Ham, he could be absolutely pivotal, not only to telling you about stuff that was going on at West Ham, but he still has links there now, and he's more happy to talk because he's not at West Ham anymore. So it's all about strategizing and thinking who's been where, who could help me, or could he pass on a phone number to me for someone at the club he used to work for? It's not rocket science. It's just constantly paying attention, focusing, thinking, and then nurturing. So making sure, as I said, you go and see these people. Say you'll come up to London. Say you'll go to Newcastle. Say you'll fly to Milan. The flights are cheaper to Milan than they are a train from Manchester to London. Go and do these things. No one's going to do it for you. The stories don't grow off trees. It's all about the contacts and connections. And then I don't want to talk for too much longer, but the skill is then what you do in those conversations. And you've got to earn the trust by spending time with these contacts, proper quality time. Don't go there saying, oh, I need a story, I need an interview. You sit down with them. I did it in London yesterday for 3 hours with a contact. We didn't speak once about a story. We just had lunch. We talked about family. We talked about the industry. We talked about players. And I came away from it thinking, oh, there was that anxiety that I didn't get anything from it, but I reassured myself that when the time is right, during a January or summer transfer window, or when he and people around him may want to do an interview, then that lunch was priceless. Absolutely priceless, because he saw me as a person. We built a friendship, an acquaintance more than a friendship, because it's always got to stay professional. The bonds were strengthened, the trust was built, the respect was harnessed, and so it's a constant, ongoing process of keeping in touch, of going and seeing people. When you see them, conduct yourself in the right way. Always respect their confidentiality. If they tell you something can't be reported, then don't report it. If they say something to you which you're not sure about, ask them if it's okay to report it as your own understanding. Was that conversation on the record? Was it off? Be very clear in your parameters, because the last thing you want to do is go and report something and then that guy rings you up and said, how dare you? That was a private conversation. You've screwed me over here. I'm in huge trouble. I'm never going to speak to you again. Bang. And that's the relationship burns. The other thing I've got to say to you is this is really hard to accept as journalists a lot of the time, but never, ever burn a bridge. Ever. Keep all of your phone numbers, back them up. So in case you lose your phone or your contacts book, so you've got them in more than one place, and continue to be in contact with people, even if they're rude or they screw you over at some point. Press officers, executives, cleaners, kit men and women, you name it, anyone in any part of clubs or organization, or if you come across players or managers or coaches or physios, and they could lie to you over time. And it happens to me on a near daily basis. And it sounds grovelly and shameless, but you've still got to go back, take the moral high ground, send them a nice text, remember when their birthday is, send them a text at Christmas or end of the season or when their team wins. And you never know when it will come in handy that you didn't burn that bridge. You are always in contact. I saw somebody last night at an event who I hadn't seen for about 10 years. And he's now in a far more high-powered job than he was at the time. But I was really, really close to him at the time when he was in his low job. And most people just let that drift away. But every year or half year, I'd send him a text, see how he was. And then we saw each other by coincidence last night at an event. And he gave me his business card with all his new details in. He said, whenever you want to come and see me, come over. Whenever you want to do something, at least float it with me. And so sorry, Darren, for the long answer. There's no fine science, but you've got to build on a daily basis, maintain on a daily basis. And then when you get in front of your contacts, you've got to nurture and cultivate trust to the point that they will entrust you with stories when the time is right. And don't be too disheartened if from time to well, pretty much every day, I'm afraid to say, stories don't come your way, setbacks occur, other journalists get stories, and your heart sinks, and you thought you had a good connection with that person. Because what goes around comes around. Your time will come if you continue to follow the right processes and practices. You will win some, you will lose some, but you'll be a really good journalist ultimately.
I love a long answer, David. Never apologise for a long answer. Certainly, just one podcaster to another. I think we've had a theme this week, actually, and you've absolutely hit the nail on the head there, right from the beginning of this week, where lots of people have said, in different variations, it's nice to be nice. And I don't think, that can't be underestimated. People maybe sometimes think you can be a bit cutthroat and be a bit this or that, and you need to be. But realistically, I think those are the journalists that aren't really going to be around too long. Sometimes, that they are, and we probably all know them. But I think majority of people, certainly that I've come into contact with, if you're nice to people all the way through your career, they remember that.
Yeah, that's a great point, Darren. And there are journalists who do it the other way, like you say, and it's immensely frustrating when they benefit and profit from it. And you're left banging your head against the wall when sometimes clubs and organizations actually embrace them, sort of better the devil you know, keep your friends close, your enemies closer, and they end up getting stories to almost to stop them from digging more dirt on you, and you say to the clubs, what are you doing? I'm speaking to you daily and we've got an amazing relationship, and they basically admit to you it's our attempt to stop them from doing their nasty journalism against us. That's why we gave him an interview, and it never works. They continue to be bastards all along, and that's their way. I feel I'm a nice person just to forget all the journalism and stuff like that. I like being nice, full stop. And so I can't really easily fake stuff and suddenly become horrible. So part of it is just being your normal self. But more often than not, the good guys and girls get treated the best. Sometimes it'll backfire. You get taken for a ride. You'll be seen as too soft. So it's very different between being nice and being tough. So you've got to grow a really thick skin. And when in my position, you're breaking big stories, my God, do you have to stay firm. There's a story that's just broken that Michael Edwards is leaving Liverpool at the end of the season. I broke that story in August. The night before I broke the story, people who I had to go to for rights of reply and to offer them the chance to input on the story and put their perspective across tried to stop me from doing it very forcefully. Told me it wasn't true, told me no decision had been made, offering me exclusive interviews with him if I keep it in-house, because they wanted to have control of the story. And you have to be so tough if you know you've got a story correct, it's been properly sourced, it's been corroborated, it's been multiply independently sourced, which is the rules of most editorial guidelines of most organizations, and rightly so. And you go into war, with comms people that don't want the story coming out. And you've got to stand firm, but you can still be a nice guy at the same time. They can swear at you all they want. They can tear apart your integrity. They can insult you. And you need to understand that unless you have got it wrong, and I think you should know that in your heart of hearts if you've tried to source a story properly. But if you've got it right and they're tearing you apart, I'm afraid you have to kind of listen, don't retaliate, and soak it up like a sponge, because it's their a direct attempt to control. That's what PR is, really. And you have to stand firm. But at the same time, you have to, and the nice people, they're the ones that people will want to go for coffees. And when times are good, those clubs that are, and organizations and comms people that are nasty towards you, they'll come to you on other stuff. And I've been told a number of times, we're not talking to you, you're not welcome here anymore. That story was ridiculous and wrong, and you print lies. And then a couple of days later, they realize the dust has settled, they've calmed down, and they want somebody who can do a nice interview. and they say to me, "Oh, would you like to come down next week?" And so a lot of people in our industry are shameless, but you don't need to be. You know, I find that I get on just fine by being a good person, and the amount of positive feedback I get from people saying, "Look, you don't win them all, David. You don't get all the stories. You get loads, but I will always come to you because you do things the right way with integrity and honesty and respect." And don't ever change that. Please, guys, don't be the nasty person. You can do just fine being the good guys and girls.
It's sage advice. Be tough, but don't be a dick, I think, is the takeaway from that. We're going to get some questions from the students very shortly. But I just wanted to ask from me one final thing. Of now with The Athletic, and I found The Athletic fascinating. A friend of mine, Phil Hay, has done some amazing work with The Athletic over the last few years. And I think it's been a bit of a breath of fresh air in the world of sports journalism and the idea of subscription sports journalism. And it's almost trying to change the way that sports journalism is viewed, and by giving opportunities and, you know, like you say, different multimedia with podcasts, with YouTube, and with written journalism. And I'm intrigued about the freedom that it gives you as a journalist to do what you want to do rather than having to just do a match preview, a match report. You've got the freedom to sort of pick and choose sort of the bigger featurey type stories that you want to do.
Yeah, I mean, there are pros and cons to every model. So at the BBC, I was able to do amazing journalism. I thoroughly enjoyed my 12 years there. I learned so much and got so many incredible opportunities. And it was wonderful to be able to project your stories to audiences for free as a public service broadcaster, and to such a massive audience globally as well. It was a real honor and privilege to be one of the biggest journalism organizations on the planet. But at the same time, you're right, a lot of compromises had to be made. I spent an inordinate amount of time writing the BBC gossip column, which is just basically arriving at 6 a.m. and sifting through the newspapers and finding the stories and putting an online link to it. It was a thankless task, but it was for the right reasons. It's the most viewed page on the BBC Sport website. Live text commentaries, some things that you don't want to do and you have to. It's part and parcel of the job, and you shouldn't turn that down. And you see things that frustrate you as well at places that are not subscription, where they're somebody like the BBC, they have to support certain sports to be shown to be sort of equal to everyone, or not equal to everyone, but fair representation across the board, which I really like. But when you've got a huge football story that you know is of great interest to millions of people around the world, and it appears lower down an index, as you call it, or a page, to an archery story, somebody qualifying for the pre-Olympic tournament, it makes the mind boggle and the heart sink. But it's an amazing place, and that will hopefully never change. At a subscription website like The Athletic, and it's the first subscription website I've worked for, or subscription service full stop, you have the power to do what you want and what they want, and to just, or this is what they sold me anyway, we just want you to play to your strengths. So whereas at the BBC, I might have, as a sports correspondent for BBC News, which I ended as wonderfully, and I loved it. But one day you could be reporting on Cristiano Ronaldo signing for Manchester United. The next day you could be stood outside the velodrome trying to talk about doping in British cycling, which is varied and it's fulfilling and it's nerve-wracking and it's great, but it's part of your duty. Whereas at The Athletic, it was like, what do you want to do? This is what we want you to do. This is what you're best at, and go get it. Enjoy yourself. And that's a marvelous opportunity that subscription websites provide the opportunity for journalists to do. At the same time, there's a slight potential drawback in that they're obviously driven by what works and what subscribers want and what drives subscription. So you may want to do an interview that you think is the most amazing story, and the editors might have a different view of how it might work for our audiences and subscribers, and just saying, no, I'm not so sure about that. And the commercial requirements have overridden the sort of desire. I've got to say, tribute to the Athletic, that's not that common from my experience. They are happy to back you when you want to do a story, even if it doesn't drive great numbers. But there is that, deep down, there is that imperative. So when I'm pulling my stories together for the Monday column, I know it will be in their mind, and mine, to be fair, what's going to work for subscribers, for audiences. And often that leads you towards the bigger clubs because they've got the bigger fan bases. And so that's a potential drawback, but I would say the benefits at a subscription site far outweigh the drawbacks. And it is very important, in my view, to serve audiences who are prepared to pay for journalism. And if audiences are, which I think the Athletic's success so far is showing is true, then it could be a really good sign for the industry, because the effort that goes into some of this journalism is quite astonishing. I work hard, many work much harder, and they produce some quite exceptional, breathtaking, jaw-dropping journalism, especially in the political world. Sport is fun by comparison, but even in the sporting world. And if people are going to be prepared to pay for it, then we could have a really healthy future. And I do think they are. So, pros and cons to both.
Very interesting. Okay, so we've got some students with some questions. First up, Sam.
Hi, David. Just want to ask what you think the key is behind the Athletic success in the last few years.
Yeah, so Sam, thanks for the question. It launched, I think, in 2016 in the States. The premise, from what I know, was to acquire the best journalists for particular teams and regions and cities, bring them under the Athletics banner, and get them doing their best work more regularly and serving those craving supporters of all the different teams. And that was the model that was sort of replicated here in the UK for the first time in my entire time in sports journalism, which dates back professionally to 2006. Dedicated club reporters who the audiences are becoming ever more hungry to read the work of and follow the work of. And Darren uses the example of Phil Hay. He's like a god in Leeds. And rightly so. He's a wonderful human being and journalist, and he's got an army of followers, rightly so. And maybe they don't want just one article in the Yorkshire Evening Post a day, or they might want to see him in, or be prepared to see him in, this unique format, which is, on the Athletic, I can read all of his articles, I can listen to his podcast, I can see the odd bit of video with him as well, and follow his social media. And so the Athletic replicated that at all Premier League clubs and selected Championship and European clubs. And then there were some general reporters like me who work across all of the clubs, have contacts everywhere, and can dip in with those guys, work on specific stories, work on day-to-day news, which was a development. That news wasn't the focus at the start, and with people like me on board, that's developed over time. And I think that's a part answer to your question, that the Athletic's offering a bit of everything, and in really high quality, respectable, trustworthy format. So the variety is one thing I'll say to you, Sam. Across the written sphere, they've got the long form journalism, they've got now the news, they've got journalists who are at the very top of their game on both. They've got journalists like Phil and me, in terms of, it was largely Arsenal with me, but now it's moving across the board that people are coming with to follow those people. If I was to give one answer though to you, sorry. Forgive me, because I've got so many thoughts in my head and I can talk to you.
No, it's great.
So I would say the bringing together of top journalists who are respected as being either the best or one of the best in their club or region, which was true of, that was the American model, and replicating it here was like a breath of fresh air for many fans who were used to seeing, a bit of stuff on their club, but the guy that covered Man City would dip into Burnley for the Daily Telegraph, and Burnley would get a bit of coverage one week, but that was it. Or they might have a website writer who was paid terribly, so probably didn't have, the motivation or the contacts or the experience to do it justice. And now the Athletic come in with quality. Every single club, integrity, respect. We don't get everything right, but if you are a fan of that club, you want to be following the Athletic guy. He should be the authority. And then there's people like me who weigh in. So that's one massive benefit and key thing. But for me, it's the inside story. And that would be my key answer to you. The ability of the journalists, either individually or collaboratively, to come together. And it's a bit of a joke within the industry about all the different bylines on a story. It's like 7 guys working on one story. But to lift the veil and to lift up the curtain and take you inside a club, to take you inside a story, an organization, some really important journalism, the likes of Adam Crafton have done on Newcastle and the Saudi Arabian takeover, that Stuart James did recently on the sexual assault allegations in Iceland, the profiles we've done on the likes of Ed Woodward and Mike Ashley, the Kroenke family at Arsenal, Daniel Levy at Tottenham, the way we weigh in these elite journalists from all over the country who were plucked from the BBC, from Sky, from the Daily Telegraph, from the Guardian, controversially at the time because a lot of sports desks lost their best staff. But the way that they've been brought together to produce the most insightful, at times exclusive, reliable journalism says to me that the audiences of today, we all see the live coverage, we all see we all read and listen to the match reports, but I think the public today more than ever want to be taken inside, the fly on the wall stuff. That's why the documentaries on Amazon have proved so successful, and the Athletic is doing that in a written form, in a podcast form, and in video form. I do the odd bit on YouTube. They've acquired Tifo as well, who do an amazing job on that too. And I think more than ever that you guys should be looking as far as possible to not just replicate match reports and things. They don't do good business. There's not really the hunger for them among the public anymore. Go inside, investigate, take people to places that they have not been before. Give them information they didn't know before. And that's where the Athletic's succeeding the most, Sam. Sorry for the long answer.
No, brilliant answer. Okay, we've got a question now from Nick, who's an Arsenal fan. Is it about transfers?
No. I was just going to ask David, Arsenal, obviously, one of the more, especially amongst the more extreme circles, one of the more toxic fan bases, especially when it's not going well in the Premier League compared to, a Southampton or whatever. How do you sort of deal with that, with the demand every transfer window for sort of a £90 million fanciful central midfielder, or and then how do you filter through that for the more sort of rational Arsenal fan, like a middle-aged man or whatever, who's not extreme and instead is content with your work?
Sorry, the first part of that, my signal crackled. So just repeat the question in brief, if you can.
Yeah, I was just going to say, how do you deal with just the toxicity of the Arsenal fan base, especially when it comes to transfers and transfer windows, and especially in the summer as well?
Gotcha. Well, it's not easy, and we talked earlier about having a thick skin and being tough, not only with the contacts and the clubs and the organizations that you're dealing with, but the fan base more so, ever more so than before. At the moment, and it's hard. It's really hard, and it can get to you at times when people are sort of piling in on you if you've got a little detail either wrong or it's right, and they don't believe you, or they think you're slow, or you're losing your contacts, and you're like shaking yourself, thinking this isn't true, and then you start doubting and questioning yourself, and you think, and you're even tempted to take a bit of a flyer to satisfy them, but never, ever, ever do that. You've got to have the courage of your convictions and believe in the skills and the abilities that got you to this point, and never, ever compromise your values to try and chase a rumor or a transfer story and put something out that's wrong. No way. Because in my view, once I say something that's wrong, I lose my USP, which is reliability and integrity. So the toxicity, you've got to be brave enough to know that you've got the story right. That they don't know, these people that are getting angry because they don't like the signing or they don't believe the story. It doesn't matter. Unfortunately, it's like horrible to say this about people, but it's noise. It's just disruptive. It's opinions. It's emotional, which I totally understand. I reported in the summer of 2018 when Liverpool, I think, lost the Champions League final, that they wouldn't be making any major signings, as my understanding, in the summer window. And the Liverpool fan base came after me viciously, disgracefully, some of the abuse I received on social media because they couldn't accept it. But I was only reporting the truth, and they were angry more towards their club, but you can't really take it out on your club, but you can take it out on a little journalist. So it's just having the faith in your reporting. If you've sourced it correctly, you stand by your reporting. If you've got it wrong, you're going to have to hold your hands up. And always remember that the noise and the anger and the bitterness and the toxicity, however loud it feels and however overwhelming it can feel and upsetting, it's normally a minority. You get far more people who are either telling you you've done well or complimenting your work, or unfortunately keeping quiet. But no news is good news. The ones that keep quiet are probably completely satisfied with your work, and they're probably the majority. And someone like Arsene Wenger at Arsenal, he did a brilliant job. And yeah, it didn't go well towards the end, but the vast majority of the people were respectful. They thought it was probably time to move on, and he did move on. The angry people that were protesting and grab all the headlines, they were the minority. And I was at an event that he was speaking at on Monday night and last night, actually, 2 nights running. And he said it didn't bother him that much, the negativity and the protests, because he knew he was doing an honest job, a decent job, keeping them in Europe for the majority of his time at the club. And he was having real people come up to him on the streets and complimenting him, and lots of fans within the stadium and outside the stadium. And it's very similar for us as journalists now. You're always going to have an angry mob, but the quality of your journalism, provided you have done it the right way and you believe in it and you've made all your checks, you've just got to stand firm and keep doing what you're doing.
Okay, we're nearly running out of time, but we'll got one more question here from Will.
Perfect. Thank you. Hi, David. So my question is about reliability. So I'm sure you saw Jurgen Klopp quite recently criticizing The Athletic for an article that was written sort of suggesting that he wanted more red cards during the Liverpool United match. I know that wasn't necessarily something that you were involved in at all.
Yep.
But it kind of begs the question, when such a public figure, and sorry, I'll apologize because there's kind of 3 parts to this question.
That's all right.
When someone who is such a public figure very openly criticizes the publication for, he branded it fake news. Mm-hmm. Is there any kind of internal investigation that happens to determine whether or not it was fake news, or is anyone held accountable for publishing something that might not be accurate? And then the second part of that question is, sort of, you are known, and you said it yourself, that your USP is reliability and integrity. So how do you go about kind of ensuring that what you produce is completely correct and verify that your sources are accurate?
Yeah.
And sorry, kind of the final part of that, the final part of that just being, do you see reliability as quite a big problem in the kind of football reporting industry? It's obviously, you see on social media all the time, it's full of gossip and kind of things that seem to be plucked from nowhere.
Yep.
So do you see that as a big problem, and is there anything that you think can be done to kind of combat that a little bit? Thank you.
Great questions. I'll try and be as brief as I can. The first one is that the Athletic reporting was correct. That what they reported, if you actually look at what they reported in the original piece, you've got no reason to know if it was correct or not, but I can tell you it was correct because I know how it was sourced, and corroborated and cleared with the club. The problem was, in the example you refer to, was that it got twisted by an aggregator, which is a massive problem for us at the moment. So I think it got twisted by a Twitter account. And then the Daily Mail did a big story on it, saying Klopp wanted 6 sendings off. The piece never said that. It said that on the bus home, staff were talking about how Man United got away lightly with the Athletic says sources close to Klopp have said that he wasn't happy with the refereeing, and people on the bus were talking about how they could have had more sendings off. The Daily Mail wrote that up and attributed it to the Athletic, saying Klopp wanted 6-7 red cards. That's what Jurgen Klopp was referring to in the press conference. And it was understandable that he was angry, but that was not the Athletic report. So there was no need for an internal investigation. What there's need for is the Athletic guys and Liverpool to sit down together, which they probably will do, and just talk it through, because Klopp got the wrong end of the stick on that one. And it's a real problem for us of people misreporting and reporting our work out of context, which happens with me regularly around my Monday column, for example. Recently, I reported that the Premier League are exploring at some point in the future staging more meaningful and competitive matches overseas. That's what I reported. The Daily Mail wrote that up as the 39th game is back on the agenda, and they're looking at taking Premier League regular season matches abroad, which I never said. And it caused a huge problem. And I had to print a clarification to help the Premier League out, even though I never said it in the first place. It was the problem that happened after. So that's what happened in the Liverpool situation. Your second question was about me and the integrity and the reliability. I will turn over every single stone I can to make sure I've complied with the editorial guidelines, which is 2 independent sources, at least 2, multiply independently sourced stories. It's the same at the BBC. I'm sure it's the same at Sky and pretty much everywhere else. There are occasions when you have got such an amazing single source where you'll go to the editor and you'll be like, I don't know. This isn't me, by the way. This is complete fabrication, which I don't do in my work. I've spoken to Gareth Southgate, and Gareth Southgate has told me that Harry Kane is dropped from the England squad. In that situation, you've got it from the horse's mouth. You might have to protect your source and just say it's our understanding. And always in those situations, you do a check call to the comms department before publication and say, just to let you know, we're about to report this. Would you like to add anything? Right of reply. We're going to be publishing in 10 minutes or 15 minutes or half an hour or something. So I cross-reference all of my stories. I do everything in my power to make sure that's accurate. I try and speak to the people involved. If I can't, I speak to people close to them. I speak to people on every side of the story to get every version. And then if I'm content and the Athletic are content with my process, even though I might not tell them my specific contacts for protection of sources, we will then go ahead and publish. It appears to be proven pretty good because I tend to get most of my stories right. Not all of them are one. Sometimes you have little bits of information that weren't quite there, but the premise of it is normally always right, which is great. And if I'm not sure on any of that, to answer your question specifically, I won't publish. If I have to risk losing it, and it's a bitter pill to swallow, and it wounds you terribly when others come out with something that you had. But if you were not in a position to do so, do not publish. Don't clear up the mess afterwards. Stop yourself in advance. And it can be painful, but at times you see the benefit of that because maybe the story wasn't quite right. And that leads me perfectly on to the third question, is that there's so much wrong information out there, and there's so much speculation, and there's a fragmentation of the media that means stuff can come out from anywhere, and you get this ITK thing, and some people, fans, get stuff right. There are big stories that they've broken or got close to, and that could be tough as a journalist because they don't obviously follow the editorial guidelines. We need to corroborate and double independently source stuff. And someone might have just heard something or got past something on the grapevine, publish it on Twitter, and they're hailed as a hero. There's a lot that is said that is wrong. and things that get out of control. And your editors turn around to you and say, everyone's reporting that Thierry Henry is about to be confirmed as the manager of Bournemouth. And I say to them, well, I've spoken to as many sources as I can, and they're telling me that's not true. And the editor's like, well, everyone's got it apart from us. And I say, you're going to have to trust me. And Thierry Henry didn't join Bournemouth, and it never actually got that close. Sometimes you'll be wrong, you'll be misled, and you'll be behind the game. But it's frustrating. But at every organisation, especially at national level, they trust their journalists, and hopefully more often than not, you will be able to cut through the noise and the fake news, and stay strong and keep the courage of your convictions. And I see a lot of people grateful for that in the public. They say, unless David or so-and-so is saying it, we're not sure it's true. Puts pressure on you. You're sat there thinking, I'm on holiday this week. I don't know if it's true or not. So go and trust those other people if you want. I'm not across every single story. Sometimes I don't have the information. But I think, keep your eyes out more often than not for the trustworthy sources, rather than, some of these stories, rumor of this player and that player and this contract and that contract. So much of it is bluster. Some of it may be true, but show a bit of patience and wait for the source, the respected sources to report it. Because between us, there's quite a lot of us across the national and local media who will get it right sooner rather than later.
Wonderful stuff. David, thank you so much for your time with us at Journalism Media Week 2021. We really, really appreciate it. And I know the students will get so much out of listening to your journey. And we wish you the best of luck with everything in the future. Thanks very much, David Ornstein.
My pleasure. Thank you, guys, and good luck.